Quentin Fairbanks hated weddings, and yet there he was, crashing one in the middle of Napa Valley, wearing a black suit worth more than the venue's floral arrangements. He parked his midnight blue Aston Martin in the gravel lot like he owned the place. Technically, he didn't. But he did own the vineyard across the road and had flown in from New York that morning to accidentally show up at his college roommate's wedding. He wasn't invited. Still, he figured Mason would be too wine-drunk and love-struck to care. He wasn't there for the vows or the cake. He was there to prove something to himself, that he wasn't as cold or broken as his last relationship had made him feel. "Sir, are you on the guest list?" the woman at the entrance asked, eyeing him suspiciously. "I'm with the groom," Quentin said smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks without breaking eye contact. The woman hesitated, then waved him through. The ceremony had just ended, and guests were filtering toward the reception in the courtyard. String lights swayed above linen-covered tables, and a jazz band played something soft under the chatter. Quentin scanned the crowd. Mason was nowhere in sight, but then again, he wasn't looking for Mason anymore. Because across the cobblestone courtyard, standing barefoot in the grass and holding a glass of rosé like it was a shield, was the most captivating woman he'd ever seen. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. Her long brown hair was swept into a messy low twist, and her soft blue dress hung off one shoulder like she hadn't even noticed it had slipped. She really laughed at something a man beside her said, and her whole face lit up like the sun had decided to shine just for her. And just like that, Quentin forgot why he'd come. "Who's that?" he asked a waiter passing with champagne. That's the bride's cousin, name's Juliette, came in from Oregon." Juliette, Oregon, cousin of the bride. He didn't think, he just moved. "You're stealing attention from the bride," Quentin said as he approached her, glass in hand, voice low and confident. Juliette turned, raising an eyebrow. "And you are, Quentin. Last name, Fairbanks." She stared at him for a second. "You're not on the guest list," he grinned. "Neither are you. I'm family. And I'm crashing." Her lips twitched like she was fighting a smile. "Why?" "Because weddings are full of people pretending to be happy, and I wanted to see if that was contagious." Juliette sipped her rosé. "That's bleak. That's honest." She looked him up and down. "You look like you walked out of a GQ ad, and you look like you couldn't care less." She tilted her head. "You're used to women fawning over you, usually?" "Well, I'm not usual." "I figured." She started walking toward the bar. He followed. "You're not from around here," she said. "Nope. Let me guess. New York, guilty, Wall Street, something like that." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not going to tell me what you do?" "I don't like talking about money on the first fake date." That made her laugh, really laugh, and he felt something in his chest loosen. They spent the rest of the evening side by side laughing, teasing, challenging each other. She wasn't impressed by his watch or his car keys or the fact that he ordered the bartender to open a bottle of wine that wasn't even on the list. She didn't care about any of that. She asked about his favorite book. She asked why he walked away from his last relationship. She asked what scared him most in the world, and he told her, things he hadn't told anyone in years. "I'm scared I'll never be enough," he said quietly. "Not for someone real." Juliette turned to face him. "Then you've been with the wrong people." Something shifted in the air. The night deepened and guests began to leave. Mason stumbled by at one point, too drunk to question Quentin's presence, and gave him a bare hug before disappearing again. Juliette checked her phone and sighed. "I should go. My hotel's 10 minutes away." "I'll drive you," Quentin said. She hesitated. "I don't know you." "Then let's fix that." She studied him. "Are you a serial killer?" "No, but I do have a private chef if that counts for anything." Her lips curved. "Fine. But the second you act like a creep, I'm tasing you with my car keys." "Fair enough." He opened the passenger door of his car like it was second nature and helped her in. The moment she slid into the leather seat, her eyes widened. "This car smells like money," he laughed. "It should." "It cost more than the wedding." Her eyes snapped to his. "Wait, who are you?" "I told you, Quentin Fairbanks." "No, who are you really?" He didn't answer until they reached her hotel. He parked under the awning and turned to her. I own a few companies. Investments, tech, real estate. Depends on the year. You're a millionaire. I don't keep track, but yes, Juliette stared at him. Why crash a wedding? Because I was tired of rooms full of people who only liked me for what I could give them. I wanted something real. She didn't say anything for a second. Then soft, and did you find it? Their eyes locked. I think I just did. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. Okay, she said quietly, let's see where this goes. He walked her to the hotel entrance. She leaned in and kissed him on the cheek, soft, slow, lingering. Good night, Quentin. He watched her disappear through the glass doors, heart racing. He'd crashed a wedding to feel something. He hadn't expected to meet the woman who would change everything. 3 days passed before Quentin saw Juliette again. He hadn't planned on staying in Napa. His original intention was to fly back to Manhattan the morning after the wedding. But something about her, a woman who looked at him like he was simply a man and not a walking bank statement, had made the idea of leaving feel like a mistake. So he didn't. Instead, he extended his stay, relocated to the Fairbanks-owned estate across the road, and told his assistant to push all meetings a week. That move had cost him a board member's patience and nearly $2 million in delayed negotiations with a tech firm out of Singapore, but none of that mattered. Not when she was still somewhere nearby. He found her again on the steps of a local bookstore in downtown Napa, arms full of paperbacks, hair tied back with a pencil jammed into the twist. She was wearing a faded denim jacket over a sundress, humming a tune he couldn't place. Either you're stalking me, she said without looking up, or fate has a very specific sense of humor. I don't believe in fate, Quentin said, stepping forward and taking half her stack before she dropped them. Well, I don't believe in coincidences, she replied, finally lifting her gaze to meet his. You always carry this many books, only when I'm escaping reality. Trouble at home, Juliette glanced toward the corner cafe and nodded. My aunt decided to set me up with a man who sells luxury wine racks and ends every sentence with if you know what I mean, I needed air. You got all these in 10 minutes, she shrugged. I'm efficient under pressure. Quentin opened the top book and read the title aloud. The Architecture of Solitude, Planning to Build a Fortress? No, she said dryly. Just trying to understand why people think being alone is noble when it's usually just lonely. Their eyes met again, and a silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but charged. Walk with me, she said suddenly, turning and heading toward the river path behind the bookstore. Quentin followed, and they wandered through the narrow trail flanked by sycamores, the smell of honeysuckle heavy in the air. Where did you grow up? She asked. Connecticut, Greenwich. Gated community, uniforms, polite lies, sounds suffocating. It was. Is that why you moved to New York? No, I moved to New York to prove I could build something on my own, and I did. But now I'm not sure what I built is anything I want to keep. Juliette stopped walking and turned to him slowly. That's a heavy confession for someone you barely know. I don't say things unless I mean them. She studied him, then looked away. I used to think I knew what I wanted too. I had this perfect plan. Grad school, publish a novel, teach literature, maybe open a bookstore, then life happened. What changed? My mom got sick. I left school to take care of her. She passed away last year. I stayed in Oregon to help my dad run the hardware store. Then my cousin begged me to come to the wedding, and here I am. Quentin didn't speak for a moment. Then, softly, I'm sorry. She would have liked you, Juliette said. She had a thing for men who looked like they belonged in black and white movies. That's oddly specific. She was oddly romantic. They walked in silence a bit longer until the trail opened up into a wide overlook above the river. The water below shimmered under the afternoon sun, and the wind picked up just enough to lift a strand of her hair. Without thinking, Quentin reached out and tucked it behind her ear. Juliette didn't move. You always touch women like that? No. Only ones who make me forget I'm supposed to keep my distance. Her breath caught, then steadied. You're dangerous. Only if you run. I don't run, I just make sure I'm not standing still for someone who won't stay. I'm not going anywhere. She turned to face him fully. You say that now. But you have a world waiting for you. I've seen your kind. You disappear as fast as you appear. I used to, he admitted. But I've never met someone who made me want to pause. Their eyes locked again, the moment heavy but unspoken. Then Juliette laughed quiet, almost surprised. You talk like you're used to getting what you want. I am. So what happens if you don't? I find a way. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. Juliette looked back at the river. You're intense. You're not. Maybe that's why this feels different a beat past. Then Quentin stepped closer. Have dinner with me tonight, she hesitated. I have plans. With the wine rack guy? No, with myself. He didn't flinch. Bring yourself, I'll meet you at the French place on Pine Street. 8 o'clock. She glanced up. You always assume women will say yes. No, but I hope you will. She didn't move. I don't need saving, I know, that's what makes you dangerous. Juliette held his gaze, then nodded slowly. All right, Mr. Fairbanks. One dinner? As she turned and walked away, Quentin watched her go, heart pounding with something he hadn't felt in years, not desire, not conquest, hope. And for the first time in a long time, he realized he didn't want to return to the life he'd built, not if she wasn't in it. Quentin arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early, which was unusual for him. He was a man who made people wait. But not tonight. The restaurant, a quiet French place tucked into a vine-covered alley off Pine Street, was lit by soft amber sconces and chandeliers draped in crystal. The maitre d' led him through the velvet-curtained entrance and seated him at a corner table already set with gleaming utensils and a single white rose in a glass vase. He didn't order wine. He didn't touch the menu. He just waited. When Juliette walked in, he stood automatically. She was wearing a navy dress with sleeves that stopped at her elbows and a neckline that dipped just enough to suggest she hadn't worn it for anyone else's approval. Her hair was down, parted to one side, and for a moment she looked around like she wasn't entirely sure she belonged here. Quentin stepped forward, offering his hand. You came. I almost didn't, she said, sliding her fingers into his. But then I figured, why not see what kind of trouble you get into over duck confit and crystal glassware? He guided her to her seat, then sat opposite, not bothering to hide the way he looked at her, not with lust but with curiosity, like she was a puzzle he didn't want to solve quickly. Have you been here before? She asked, glancing at the menu. I bought the building 4 years ago, didn't even realize this place was one of the tenants until last week. Juliette blinked. You bought the whole building. It was a good investment. The wine bar downstairs pulls in a crowd. She shook her head. You say that like you're talking about a coffee run. I forget sometimes that not everyone thinks in real estate parcels. I forget sometimes that people like you exist outside of Netflix. He grinned. Is that a compliment? It's a warning. Before he could reply, the waiter approached. They ordered, her picking the trout almondine and him the lamb, then returned to their quiet space. So, she said, folding her hands over the tablecloth. What happened to your parents? My father's still alive. Lives in Palm Beach, married a woman he met at a yacht show. My mother left when I was 10, moved to Italy. She's a sculptor now. Juliette didn't look away. Do you talk to her? She sends postcards. I don't reply. Why not? Because I don't know what I'd say. She nodded once. I used to think silence fixed things. Turns out it just makes it harder to remember how to speak. Quentin let that hang between them, then he leaned forward slightly. You're not what I expected. And what did you expect? Someone who'd smile politely, ask about my net worth, and spend the rest of the evening trying to get invited to my penthouse. Sorry to disappoint. You haven't disappointed me once. Their food arrived, filling the space with the scent of rosemary and browned butter. They ate without rushing, the conversation slower now but still alive. Juliette set down her fork and looked at him across the candlelight. Why did you really crash that wedding? Because I was tired of being surrounded by people who only saw the version of me that's useful to them. And what version do you think I see? I'm not sure yet, but I know you're not trying to sell me anything. She looked down at her hands. I've never understood why people pretend to be impressed by things they don't even want. Because it's easier than admitting they're lost. Juliette's eyes softened, but she didn't look away. You're not lost, Quentin. You're just standing in the wrong city. He tilted his head. Where should I be standing? Somewhere that makes you feel like yourself again. Their waiter returned with the check, but Quentin waved it off. It's handled, he said without glancing at the bill. Outside, the night had cooled. The breeze carried the scent of lavender from a nearby planter, and the street lamps cast a golden hue along the sidewalk. Juliette pulled her jacket tighter. I should go. I'll walk you. She didn't argue. They strolled past shuttered boutiques and quiet cafes, their footsteps sinking without thought. When they reached the corner where her car was parked, she turned to him. This was unexpected, she said. In a good way, in a way that makes me nervous. Why? Because I don't know what comes next. You don't have to, she crossed her arms, eyes searching his. You said you weren't going anywhere. You still mean that? I do. And what if I'm not ready for the kind of life you live? Then I'll wait, or I'll change it. She stared at him like no one had ever said that to her before. Don't say things you'll regret later. I won't regret you. The silence between them stretched again, this time more fragile, more dangerous. Then she stepped forward, closed the space between them, and kissed him. It wasn't fireworks, it wasn't cinematic. It was real, warm, steady, filled with breath and hesitation, and the kind of desire that didn't need to be rushed. When she pulled back, she whispered, "Good night, Quentin." He watched her get into her car and drive away, heart pounding harder than it had in years, not because he was falling, but because this time he didn't want to stop. Juliette stood in the middle of the Fairbanks Estates rose garden, a place she hadn't known existed until Quentin had shown up at her door that morning with a single line. Come with me. There's something I want you to see. Now she was surrounded by rows of antique blooms in full, intoxicating bloom white Eden climbers, dusky pink bourbons and delicate golden musks, their fragrance drifting in the warm afternoon air. This doesn't feel like something a man who lives in penthouses and private jets would care about, she said, brushing her fingers along a petal. Quentin adjusted the cuffs of his shirt but didn't look away from her. My mother used to bring me here before she left. It was the only place she never lied. Juliette turned to him, her expression unreadable. You never told me about this. Because I didn't want to bring anyone here until I was sure. Sure about what? That you weren't just passing through. She walked slowly toward the wrought iron bench at the edge of the garden, the full skirt of her linen dress catching the breeze. You think a few moments under the Napa sun is enough to erase the fact that we live in different worlds? No, he said. But I think the world I built doesn't feel like mine without you in it. She sat down, folding her hands in her lap. You don't even know if I'm staying in California. I booked you a return flight for tomorrow, first class, but I didn't confirm it. That's a bold move. It's an honest one. Juliette looked at him, her voice quieter now. I don't want to be someone you rescue from a life she never asked to be saved from. I don't want to rescue you. I want to stand next to you while you build whatever life you choose. She exhaled, pressing her palms against her knees. You don't get to say things like that and expect it to be easy afterward. I don't expect it to be easy. He took a slow step closer. I expect it to be worth it. She hesitated, then looked toward the villa behind them. You live in a world where people say anything to get what they want. I used to. And now I only say what I mean. You made sure of that. Juliette rose from the bench. Then tell me why me, why this, why now? Because you make me forget the version of myself I learned to fake. Because I've spent years surrounded by people who only see the surface. You look deeper in 5 minutes than anyone has in 5 years. When she didn't respond, Quentin reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Juliette froze. What are you doing? I'm not proposing, he said gently. Not yet, but I am asking. He opened the box to reveal a key silver engraved with the initials JMC. Come to New York, stay with me, just for a while, you don't owe me anything, you don't have to promise anything. I just want to know what it feels like to wake up beside someone who makes me feel like a man, not a brand." She stared at the key for a long time before finally lifting her gaze. "What if I say no? Then I'll still remember that you made me want something real again." Juliette took the key from the box slowly, holding it in her palm like it was heavier than it looked. "I don't know what this means yet. You don't have to, but I want to find out." Quentin's shoulders dropped slightly in relief. "Then that's all I need." Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned from gold to violet, Juliette stood barefoot on the balcony of the guest suite in Quentin's estate, the key still in her hand. He joined her without a word, standing just behind her. "Do you ever get tired of all this?" she asked. "The money, the pressure, the constant expectation. I get tired of pretending it's enough." She turned to face him, her voice steady. "I want to do something first. Before I figure out what's next." "What is it?" "I want to finish the novel I started 3 years ago. I want to write the ending I never gave it." "Then write it," he said without hesitation. "I'll clear you a space in my home, build you a library if that's what you need." She laughed softly. "You don't have to build me anything, but I want to." Juliette studied him for a long moment, then stepped forward and placed the key into the pocket of his shirt. "Then start by holding on to this. For now," he nodded, his hand closing gently over the fabric. "Whenever you're ready." The next morning, Quentin stood alone on the tarmac of a private airstrip, watching as Juliette boarded a sleek jet bearing the Fairbanks crest. He didn't follow her. He didn't ask for a timeline. He simply waited. 3 weeks later, he was in the middle of a board meeting on the upper floor of his Manhattan tower when his assistant stepped in, whispered something in his ear, and handed him an envelope. Inside was a single-page typed, double-spaced, the first chapter of a novel titled The Architecture of Choosing. At the bottom, a line in Juliette's handwriting. "Chapter 2 waits for you in Oregon." He didn't wait for the meeting to end. The jet left the runway within an hour. When he arrived at the small coastal town she'd returned to, she was already waiting at the edge of the pier, arms crossed, wind tugging strands of hair across her face. "Didn't think you'd come this fast," she said as he stepped off the dock. "You said you were writing chapter 2, he replied. "I'm not about to miss being part of it." She held out her hand. "Then stay a while, see how this story unfolds." He took it, not because this was a new beginning, but because it already was their story, and this time neither of them was walking away. The morning fog blanketed the Oregon coast in a silver hush as Quentin stepped out onto the porch of Juliette's cottage. The old wood creaked under his weight, the smell of sea pine and salt water drifting in on the breeze. He hadn't worn a suit in weeks. The Fairbanks estate, his Manhattan office, all of it felt like a dream someone else had insisted he live. Inside, Juliette stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing one of his shirts. Sleeves rolled past her elbows as she poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. Her hair was still damp from the shower, and her face was bare, honest, and unguarded in a way that made his chest tighten. She looked up as he entered. "You didn't sleep," she said, handing him a mug. "I didn't want to miss this. Here. Just like this." She leaned against the counter, sipping her coffee slowly. "You're still not used to quiet, are you?" "I'm getting better." Juliette tilted her head. "You know you don't have to keep showing up to prove something. I'm not trying to prove anything." "Then what are you doing?" Learning what it means to stay, she set her mug down. "I finished chapter 16 last night." "How's it going?" I rewrote the middle. The main character stops running not because everything makes sense, but because she finally realizes it doesn't have to. Quentin reached for her hand. "That sounds familiar." She laced her fingers with his. "I was scared this would feel temporary. Like something borrowed from another life. Does it feel that way now?" "No, it feels like the first real thing I've had in a long time." He lifted her knuckles to his lips. "Then let's make it permanent." Juliette froze. I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet." "But I did meet with a contractor yesterday while you were at the bookstore." "What kind of contractor?" "One who specializes in restoring historic buildings." Her brow furrowed. "Why?" Because there's an old inn by the cliffs 15 minutes from here. It's been boarded up for over a decade. I bought it. You bought a building again. This one's for you. Quentin, you said once you dreamed of opening a bookstore. I thought maybe it could be more than that. A bookstore with a writing studio, a gallery, and a place for us to live that doesn't belong to a version of me I no longer want to be. She stared at him, jaw slack. You did all that in a day? I've had the idea since the second week I got here. I just waited to be sure you'd want to stay. Juliette stepped closer. You didn't ask what I wanted, you just did it. I'll tear it down if you hate it. I don't hate it. Then say something, anything, her voice cracked. I never thought someone would want to build something with me, not just for me, with me. He pulled her into his arms. That's all I've ever wanted. She buried her face in his chest, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Later that afternoon, they drove to the cliffs. The inn stood at the edge of the world, its stone walls weathered and ivy-covered, windows boarded up, roof sagging in parts, but the bones were solid. Juliette stepped out of the truck and stared up at it. It's beautiful. It's a mess, so am I. He walked up behind her. Then let's rebuild together. She turned to him, eyes shining. You're serious about this? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She reached for his hand again, and they stood there, side by side, as the wind whipped around them and the waves crashed far below. 6 months later, the inn had transformed. The main floor had been gutted and rebuilt with hardwood floors and sun-washed walls. One wing became a bookstore. Juliette filled the shelves herself, organizing them not by genre but by mood. The other wing housed a writing studio with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sea. Upstairs, they lived in a suite tucked behind a hidden doorway, their bedroom filled with plants and books, and the smell of cedar. Quentin installed a small office in the back, but he rarely used it. Most days he helped with inventory, made coffee for guests, or sat beside Juliette on the porch while she edited her manuscript, now more than halfway done. People came from neighboring towns just to see the place. Some stayed for the view. Others stayed for the feeling that something real had been built here, something that didn't need to be flashy or loud to matter. One crisp autumn evening, as the last customer left and the bookstore lights dimmed, Juliette sat on the back steps, a blanket draped around her shoulders. Quentin joined her, handing her a mug of mulled cider. There's something I want to ask you, he said. Is it about converting the attic into a reading lounge? Because I'm already on board. No, he said. It's about forever. Juliette turned to look at him. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a ring not flashy but elegant, a sapphire set in a simple gold band. I don't want to go back to a life without you in it. I don't want to build anything else unless your name is beside mine. Will you marry me? Juliette didn't speak. She just nodded once and then again as tears spilled down her cheeks. I love you, she whispered. More than I ever thought I could. He slid the ring onto her finger. Then let's write the rest of our story together. The wedding was held on the cliffs behind the inn, beneath a driftwood arch wrapped in wildflowers. Only a handful of people attended. Mason, the bookstore regulars, a few of her students from the writing program she'd started. They wrote their own vows. Hers were raw and steady. His were short, but every word meant. Afterward, they danced in the garden behind the inn, barefoot under string lights, music drifting into the night. And when the last guest left and the candles burned low, Quentin carried Juliette up the stairs of their home, pausing only to whisper, "Welcome to forever." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. I've been waiting my whole life for it.